You're listening to Codepunk with Bill Ahern and Michael Zuhl, a podcast about the intersection between programming, technology, and the digital lifestyle.
Hi, Michael. How you doing? It's been a while, it feels like, since we've really kind of sat down over the mics.
It has been, we try to record these at the beginning of each month, and we record a couple in succession, and we didn't record it all in January. And I know a lot of people were pretty down on 2016. 2017 has not shaped up very well. And I mean, beyond anybody's political affiliation, as you know, I went to New Jersey for the holidays, for Christmas and for New Year's. And I was up there for about a week and a half, and I brought my wife, and of course the twins came with me. And as the vacation was winding down, I could tell that the kids were getting sick. And sure enough, we came home on January 1st, came home on New Year's, and both kids started coming down with a cold. My son came down with it first. About 2 days later, my daughter came down with it. And about 2 days after that, my wife came down with it. And it was a bad cold, man. It was like they were highly congested. They had enough chest congestion that we took them to the doctors. We thought maybe they were getting bronchitis. Luckily, they weren't. But we ended up having to take them back to the doctors about a week and a half later. And both of them had ear infections. So we had to start giving them, amoxicillin for the ear infections. And
on top of the cold thing that they had.
On top of being sick. And then, of course, Heather got it really, really bad. No ear infections, but she got all of the congestion. Got the chest congestion, pretty bad. And I got to say, the kids were sick for maybe the first 2 weeks in January. And then Heather took it into like a third week, and she still has a lingering cough a little bit even now. And then, of course, what usually happens in our situation is after everybody's done getting sick, I get sick. And I got lucky this time that I was only sick for maybe, a couple of days. I didn't get really bad congestion. It just, my throat got scratchy. I felt like I got a little bit of congestion, and then luckily, started going away. And I probably attribute that a little bit to, with me traveling, I'm in and out of the house. I'm driving an hour to work and back. Although I don't work in a hospital, I work around a hospital and around, medical doctors and people in the medical profession. So I'm wondering if just from catching a lot of those germs, I'm building my immunity back up, because I used to never get sick until about 2-3 years ago. I started to catch colds again. Now it seems to be fading, but it was a good 3 weeks before I was even in any type of shape, or the household was in any type of shape to record. And by then I didn't really have enough research done for either, podcast episode for us to really try to put anything down in stone in January. So most of this is my fault that you guys haven't heard from us in a while. But now that, everything's settled down in my household, we're going to get back on schedule and start pushing through these things.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. Yeah, I got really sick too. And not, of course, not to mention that my house had a lot of repairs, and we had some black mold, which I think maybe wasn't the direct cause of what my wife believes. We both got the same thing, and she suspects maybe we got bronchitis because it was pretty intense and lasted a long time.
Right.
Just a rough. 2017 didn't kick off real well, but I'll tell you, in light of all of the climate that we're experiencing, and this is just sort of a little side thought, but I really think that it's important for people who feel maybe down or unhappy or something is, I think a lot of times society, it's good to be tested, on a positive note, it's really good to be tested to see what kind of things come from resistance. Some people are happy with the way, the direction, the world and our country in particular is going. Many more people are not. And like I said, I just think it's not always a bad thing to have, as an individual and as a society, to have your faith tested. I think it's important.
Right.
And typically good things come through the end of that.
Right. No, I agree with you. And we'll see how a lot of things go. I know in our next episode, we're going to talk a lot about encryption and how it deals with government and freedom of the press and things like that. This episode, however, it was interesting because I didn't want to do like a retrospect, because end of 2016, everybody was kind of doing a retrospect, and I really felt honestly that our 10th episode, our last episode, was Strange Days. We talked about a cyberpunk movie that was about the turn of the century. So in many ways, that was a retrospect in that we were hitting New Year's with roughly a New Year's style episode. And I didn't want to do a retrospect because it was kind of getting played out, but at the same time, I wanted to reflect back upon kind of what we've been doing, because we did hit 10 episodes. And to me, that's kind of a milestone. I know, there are people who start up podcasting, maybe get a couple episodes into it. They maybe get 10, maybe to get past 10, but it gets a little uneven and they kind of start to fall off. And so I'm happy that we got as far as we did. And we made a lot of changes throughout those 10 episodes as we continue to improve. So I kind of thought, what can we do that's a retrospect, but not really a retrospect? And I was like, you know what? We can go a little meta with it, and we can do a podcasting episode about podcasting, because, I know you have a lot of experience in it, way more experience than me, and you've been doing this for a long time. And I thought that maybe in this episode, you could talk about your past experiences with podcasting. Obviously Drop Shock Radio ran for a very long time. Kind of talk a little bit about your experience, how you got into it, what the appeal was for you. And then as we lead up to kind of where we got together, we can talk about some of the improvements that we made over the course of this episode. So what do you think about that?
I think it works really well. And, I think a retrospective, I always like to call them postmortems, although it comes with a little morbid, I think, sometimes. But I think that podcasts they've become so commonplace now that I think it almost becomes a little easy to overlook how disruptive they've been, because we'll look at things like the internet, which obviously podcasts and internet go hand in hand. But, in terms of listening to the radio, consuming media, it's become just so easy to digest podcasts, and you hear about other things like social networks disrupting traditional media. Podcasts never really get a nod. And I find that to be very interesting, because almost everyone I know listens to podcasts. They were either listening to a streaming service, another disruptive kind of service, or they listen to podcasts. And when I got into podcasts, and I found them mainly because I was looking for, I don't specifically remember what turned me on to them, or I know I was looking for video game related shows. I wanted to listen to content about Halo specifically.
Right.
And I remember I think one of the first two podcasts I listened to was there was a website I used to go to called Too Old to Play. And they might still be around. I haven't checked in a long time. And they had and I think that's how I came across it, because I liked their website, and it was about a bunch of friends getting together, and they would create like a community that you could friend up and go play with like-minded individuals in Halo. And they had the podcast called Too Old to Talk, I think was what it was. And I listened to that, and it was pretty funny, and I liked it. And somehow or another, I also came across a podcast called Podtacular, which was a Halo specific show.
Right. I remember that.
When I was listening to it, I didn't like that show too much. Just for personal, it just wasn't my sort of tone. The jokes were deliberately cheesy. So anyway, me and a friend, a guy that I would, who would go and call himself Suicide X, we started a podcast for Halo. And it was, that was 2004 or 5. And I was really surprised at how quickly we got traction. We did an episode 0, which is basically us just cursing, just being idiots. Cause you're thinking nobody's going to listen to this, and we're really just trying to rib each other and make each other laugh. So we're being really vulgar and kind of pointless. And that first stupid 30-second episode got something like 1,000 downloads, which by today's standards is nothing. But in 2005, that was what's going on here?
Right. And I remember two things about specifically about Drop Shock. I remember that one, after you put the website up, you had an extremely lively message board. People from all over who were huge Halo fans were getting in there and communicating. And the other thing that I remember, which kind of stemmed out of our work at the time, was you developed the prick list. Which caught on also, which was pretty cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the prick list before you move on into some of the growth of Drop Shock and some of the other stuff?
Yeah, I think that was the hook, because before we had put up the message board, which we used PHPBB maybe, and then I went and switched, but I was using open source stuff. So we did the show, and then there's really not, you can talk about playing Halo, but what really are you going to discuss? We weren't expert players. We were decent, but we decided that we were going to kind of make a point to actually call out people by name who we met online that were unsavory to play against. They were just generally griefers and hassling. We just kind of thought a little vigilante justice. And so what we would do is we would basically make fun of them on the air. I think that was where we got our traction from, because that was sort of like the unique identifier for the show. No other shows were doing that. We are more irreverent, we were going more for the shock jock sort of style.
Right.
And then because we had that tone in the show, that's how it evolved. And then when we put the message board up, that was a big deal. I think the prick list was just, there's different ways to do it now, but I think it was fairly valuable. I think in some sense, it was nice to know like people are kind of pushing back against online trolls.
Right. Which you kind of still need today.
And it was sort of giving an outlet to that. Like, you're playing Halo. And I remember this, Halo back then, you had proximity voice, and I don't think you could turn it off in Halo 2. So basically, if the team you're playing against, if they were going to say a bunch of lewd, aggravating things, you really just kind of had to take it. And it could be frustrating. Sometimes it was funny, but when you're playing a lot of Halo and you're running into these kind of guys and girls, but almost always guys, it's really annoying. So it was sort of a way to sort of vent against that. And I think the prick list, and then when we did start the forum, we actually wound up having a sort of battle with Podtacular, the show that I said it.
Right.
Because I think I started dissing them on the air, and that kind of took off, and then people would come on our forums. And so I think that having a community built around the show was something that really was crucial for giving it legs. I mean, we had the hook with the prick list, and the longevity came with the community. And that was important, I think.
Right. And you guys spent a lot of time on Drop Shock. I mean, that lasted for a significant period of time, especially considering that although it was about online gaming, I mean, focus was Halo. I mean, Drop Shock came from Drop Shock Troopers. Well, eventually you kind of, I mean, you spent a lot of time on it. You did your thing. Did you just get tired of doing it? Was it a limitation in the amount of material, or did you just feel like it was time to move on to something else?
For me, I really liked it. When I was a kid, I used to take mixtapes, and I would record. I had those like double decker mixtape things where you have like a cassette, like 2 cassettes you could record. I would do my own radio shows in grade school. I've always been sort of the idea of creating media content has always appealed to me. With the Drop Shock show, it got, I think my partner, Suicide X, got a little turned off. He's a little bit, he's not a little bit, he's an introvert. So he was able to sort of expose a more playful side of himself, have fun on the show. But it got really weird for him when the level of popularity got to such that there were people doing research on us online and like somehow figuring out like our personal back then MySpace.
Right.
So people would find pictures of us on our MySpace, and we never really referred to we may have once or twice referred to each other by our first names, but we went by our handles. And excuse me, people figured out who we were, and like on our own message board, like posted pictures of me with my then girlfriend, and they started kind of doing stuff like that. It just got a little too real for my co-host, so he kind of got sick of it and bailed out. I kept going. I started doing a bunch more shows, less Halo specific and more related to other subjects that I liked, including video games.
Right. And then you moved on to another podcast after that, right?
Yeah, I started my own because I wanted to do a daily format. It was tough too, as you and I experience. It's tough for us to kind of coordinate our schedules and make sure you have the content ready. I wanted to do something that I did a daily. It was like a 5-minute news wrap up of video games for the day. So whatever happened about video games for that day, I did a quick 5 minutes, and I think I called that Game Runner, and I did a number. I don't even think I can remember off the top of my head the different shows I've done now over the years, but it totals about 5.
Right, and I think most of them are on Internet Archive, right?
Yeah, most of them should be. Yeah, the ones that I specifically ran and produced, they'll all be on Internet Archive. And then I did a couple shows, some one-offs with some other friends who were doing their own regular series, and I'd kind of come up.
Right. And just to briefly interject, archive.org, Internet Archive, that's where the Wayback Machine is. You can upload your media there, and it's hosted for free. They have a lot of resources. They just recently started the Trump Presidential Archive, that they align video appearances all the way back to 2009 with fact checking. So it's a great service, and they recently made sure to remind you guys that you can actually go if you see a web page and you're worried that it's going to disappear, you can actually have them archive it immediately. They have a link for that. And I recently donated money to them. I think you give money to them too. But it's a really good service. It's a really good organization. And if you are looking for a place to donate, whether it's Electronic Frontier Foundation or Internet Archive or Free Software Foundation or any of those, there's a lot of places that kind of need your support in today's day and age. And I think archive.org is a fabulous one if you're going to use them as hosting for your media like we do. You kick them a couple of extra bucks. They've been good to us, and I know they've been good to plenty of other people.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. In fact, and I donate to archive.org. I think they provide one of the most valuable services on the internet, if for nothing else, just because you can put your content up there for free, like no strings attached. In fact, when we first started doing DropShock, I was looking for some places to put content online, and obviously it was a completely different landscape back then. There wasn't a whole lot of options.
Right.
If you wanted to create video or audio, most of the times you had to pay. And the first service we went with, we did the first few shows up there, and they were really terrible. They oftentimes would. They weren't. I forget now what it was, but it was tough to download stuff from them. They're really inconsistent. And
right, was that Libsynth?
Libsyn? No, that's Libsyn. I think is still around. I think they're actually a popular one.
Okay, no, I think they're one that you have to pay for.
They are.
I can't
they
remember.
Are. And this other one I found, they were I think free, or I had to pay like a minimum upfront cost. But they just went out of business. They weren't even around anymore. So I remember I was looking for a while, and I found archive.org, and I have been using archive.org since, with the exception of like maybe a handful of those early DropShock shows, I've been with archive.org the whole entire time. And I'm always surprised to hear that people will pay companies like Libsyn when I'm like, but archive.org is free. Like anyone can use it.
Right.
There's no limitations on what you can use. Why would you pay? Maybe there's other services bundled in with it, but I'm like, nah, I just need a place to put my files, and that works perfectly.
Yeah, and they have a motive behind it too. I mean, their motto is to archive the internet. They want your media. They want everything. I mean, they have this huge data center, and they want to archive all of that. Very much a library style format. So I mean, you're giving them free content, whether it's good content or bad content. That's for anybody to decide. But you're giving them free content, and in exchange, they're keeping it on their servers and they're hosting it. And if you choose to donate, you choose to donate. So I think it's a fantastic service.
Yeah, I agree, and I have to wonder what their like server farms look like. They've got to be massive, right? Like they realistically would have to be on par with Google, don't you think? I mean, that's a lot of content they're hosting.
I think they actually use, so if you go to developers.archive.org and you take a look at some of their API, they have a Python library and a Python binary that they use so that you can do mass uploading and downloading of some of their content. And from what I can tell, and it's just from, I haven't gone in depth in their developer docs, but from what I can tell from skimming the surface level, I think they use Amazon S3. So they have local data centers, I believe, in their offices in, I know it's in California. I forget exactly where. So they have local servers that I have seen in some, unless they're just there for decoration, but I have seen them in some of the documentaries when they get interviewed. You see these servers behind them. But also, obviously, I'm sure they offload a ton of content to Amazon Web Services, S3 storage. And
that'd be smart, especially if they're trying to do some sort of backup service or something. But I think that podcasting, and the thing is now, so this is basically a retrospective that we're doing of the last year. And, now my one main problem with podcasting now, not as a medium, but as a consumer of podcasts is, excuse me. So there's a number of really great apps you can use. There's websites you can go, like aggregators, and another actually I used. This was really helpful in us, I think, gaining followers in the beginning, was a place called Podcast Alley. And that seemed to be the go-to place for, like, because we as soon as we got on the Podcast Alley, we got subscribers like shot up. I guess because a lot of people at the time are going to this site. And I remember at the time, the number one podcast was a Firefly podcast. Yeah, and that was number one for a long time. And I went there and I found a lot of cool podcasts on there. Some I still occasionally like loop back around if like I switch apps and I can't remember all the shows I was listening to. Some of those first shows that I still like to listen to came from when I was back on Podcast Alley, and we would actually promote the site at the end of the old shows, like go to Podcast Alley. And, I think because people could like your show or vote for your show. And then every month they'd have a tally. And obviously that's how they know who was number 1 and 2 and 3 and all that. And for a little while we were the top 10 video game podcast. So that was an achievement. But the thing was, it was nice to have a site that kind of helped bubble up the more popular stuff. And, and now, because I guess both the ubiquity, not only of aggregator sites, but also of podcasting itself, really sorting through all the user generated content is really tough. And, at this point now, I don't even know how to, like 2016, I don't really think I picked up any new shows. I think maybe a couple recommendations that you made. And that's it. Like, I'm sure that there's really great content coming out every year, every month. And I wouldn't even know how to chase it now. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's so hard because, like, I mean, you mentioned Podcast Alley, and in early years there was Odeo, which was like a podcast directory and aggregator from the people who eventually developed Twitter. They were actually working on Odeo, and Twitter was a side project for those guys. And then Twitter took off, and they abandoned Odeo. And there's no real true way to find good content. I mean, yes, you have Android. You can check the Android marketplace. You can check, the App Store, and you can search for podcasts. And yes, there's Stitcher, and I believe Spotify even puts podcasts on there. But it's really kind of it's not transparent at all as far as what new things are out there, how many subscribers. I mean, even for us, like, we don't get subscriber totals from iTunes. There's no way. How is there no way to actually go in there and look at how many people have downloaded this? They don't offer that to us at all. And that's valuable information. So we have to actually use a third-party tracker in front of the URL to kind of track, where did people come from? What kind of devices did they have? How many downloads? I mean, it's ridiculous that information isn't out there. And then when you look at podcast discovery, I mean, there are a couple of top ones that I kind of found kind of in the App Store. And then based on listening to other podcasts, that's how I find newer ones. I mean, Douglas Rushkoff came out with Team Human several months ago, maybe half a year ago by now. And I'm like, okay, I know Doug. I said, let me take a listen to it. But I found that from his Twitter feed, him just mentioning it. And then from Team Human, I find out about another person's podcast, and then I give that a try. It's so, I mean, it's just so difficult. And I got most of the podcasts that I listened to today, I actually got off of when I had my Windows phone. They had a podcast app that had halfway decent discovery, and I've just kind of carried those ones over. But if it wasn't for doing some legwork and some friend recommendations and maybe listening to podcasts that other podcasters listen to, I would never find half the stuff that I'm listening to today.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of the things I was worried about a long time ago, like early on, as I really sort of felt that podcasting was something that maybe not professionally, but I would do for the rest of my life, or at least for a very long time, because it's easy and it's fun. One of the things that concerned me, and I sort of see that play out, but it didn't turn out to be as draconian as I suspected, was media getting involved in it, like large media, they still do things that I don't really like, but I understand that with, like I said, how it disrupted traditional media, there are more mainstream media types, Bill Maher. And I remember you would get snippets of their shows, like their actual broadcast shows, and they were like trying to pawn them off as podcasts. And I still am a little bit of like a purist. Like, don't break off chunks of your show and just try to hawk that and treat podcasts like an upsell, or not treat it like an upsell, but like use it as a marketing tool. A podcast is I want your content that's targeted for this medium. I don't want just a, you know what I mean? As in like a second class citizen. I didn't like that. I sort of took it personal because, I was really doing podcasting before it was a household name. And, I really kind of felt like, it was something that was near and dear to me. And I mean, it still is. I still feel that way. But I do see people tailoring their content more to it. I don't really mind that people do sort of like those, I don't know what you would call it, but like you can get the short version of the show and then you can pay or subscribe and get like the full version. I realize.
Yeah, that's iffy to me. I mean, I know people need, people need to make a living and everything, but I mean, I guess if people are willing to pay for it, I mean, by all means. To me, there's the flip side of that. There's the one that's kind of trimmed down to give you this kind of snippet for your podcast, and then there's the ones that are just so overblown and long. I mean, you and I discussed before that under an hour is ideal. And really, I mean, if I judge it, like when are you going to listen to podcasts? You're either going to listen to them at work, but you're probably interrupted at work. You can listen to them on the car ride, or you can listen to them, while you're jogging or exercising. So there's a certain time frame where it's like you'd like to complete one or more. And so some of the things that I've noticed is that under an hour is ideal, or under an hour is the best, and then maybe around 30 minutes to 40 minutes is ideal.
I think
so. There are shorter podcasts that run, I would say, like Radio Lab, and also 99% Invisible. Even if I'm not interested in the topic that they're talking about that day, because that podcast might only run 20, 25 minutes, I'll still listen to it, because you know what? The quality is high. The guys are always interesting. I might learn something new. But if that podcast was 45, 50 minutes, I'm liable to mark it as already listened to and remove it from my device if it's something that I'm not, into. So I mean, those are kind of, you have to take that into consideration. And I look at Joe Rogan is a great comedian. I mean, I love the guy's comedy specials. I'm constantly quoting him at the office, but his podcast can run from 2 to 3 hours long. And I just don't have, and he does, several episodes a week. I just do not have the time to listen to that at all. So I can't listen to it. And
I agree.
I've tried to
go ahead.
I've tried a couple of wrestling podcasts, like whether it's Stone Cold Steve Austin or Jericho's podcast. And the problem with those is they run about an hour and a half long. And like the first 20 to 30 minutes is just them trying to hawk their advertisers. And, it's kind of hard to try to fast forward through all that while you're driving in a car and you have a touchscreen device. So again, those are podcasts that, although there's information in there that I'd like to hear, I just don't listen to.
Yeah. And I was going to add that I think that when you see a show that's like 2-3 hours, there's almost this, for me, I just feel that there's this implicit kind of like, we're going to be spreading it out. It's spread out, which means you have to put that much more time. It's just not informationally dense. Right now it's 3 hours, and maybe you might get something interesting every 20 minutes or something out of it, and then there's a lot of rambling or, like you said, selling, hawking wares. I'm like, I'm not really interested in that. Like, if I want that, I'll listen to terrestrial radio or, so it's just not what I'm interested in. Now, here's an interesting thing talking about targeted content specific for podcasts is shows like, have you listened to Serial?
Yeah, I have. Actually.
And I think that kind of comes with like This American Life. I think NPR is putting out a lot of great stuff that, it's for the radio, but it obviously it fits the podcast format perfectly. But I think Serial was great. And I do hope for more content like Serial, because they're kind of calling it like the killer app for podcasts.
Right.
Which is great, because I know a lot of people that listen to podcasts, but that's also because I know a lot of people that are, more nerdy and geeky, which is still, podcasts do kind of fall, I think, still into that column a little bit of like niche stuff. Like my mom heard of a podcast, but she doesn't listen to them. She might still listen to radio. And so I think that it would be good, kind of to spread that, because again, I'm a big fan of disruption. So more shows like Serial would be great.
So my mom doesn't, she doesn't listen. Actually, she doesn't listen to podcasts. She's aware of podcasts. And then she became aware of our podcast, and she was like, "What's that about?" And I said, "Oh, it's about technology and cyberpunk." And she was like, "Okay, never mind." So one less listener there. Yeah. But you and I mean, we used to, hell, we've known each other since 2004, and we used to have long philosophical conversations that would span all kinds of subject matters. I mean, from straight philosophy to religion to science, politics, philosophy of politics. I mean, there was just a wealth of knowledge between the two of us, whether we would debate or we would try to play off, each other's ideas. I mean, when we used to consult for the same company, and I used to consult, and you worked for a company in Philadelphia, and we used to go grab our lunch and sit at the lunch table and have a loud discussion about stuff that probably made everybody else in the office wonder what the hell we were talking about. So we always had the content, and there was this idea of one day us actually getting together and doing a podcast. And I never knew exactly what format it would take or exactly what topic it would be about. And then when I decided to register the codepunk.io domain, which I got that name from you, so I said, you know what, we should get together and finally do that. That podcast. Let's do something technology wise. Let's do it kind of influenced by cyberpunk because we both grew up with that genre, and so we started to get this going. And it wasn't completely successful when we first started out, but we've made improvements kind of as we've gone along. And I know the first episode, it was kind of like, well, how are we going to do this? What was the format? So we actually had 3 topics in the first episode where we talked about a little bit of something in cyberpunk, and then we talked a little bit about programming, and then had a little rant about another piece of programming. And although the topics flowed well together, I mean, I thought we did a good job of kind of tying those pieces together in a conversational way. It was clear after the first episode that's just it wasn't going to work that way, because they were just too disparate. And I had talked to another friend who does podcasts, and he was like, yeah, he says, I didn't know what it was about at first because you didn't have an intro, which we didn't have an intro or an outro at the time. And then we kind of, moved from one topic to the other. So we decided to kind of tighten that up a little bit. And we did decide to start doing basically one topic per episode. Although we, in conversation in the beginning, we might ramble a little bit about beer or sick children or whatever. But we've tried to maintain a focus of one topic per episode. And we had some technological difficulties as well in the first couple of episodes. And I don't know whether you wanted to kind of speak towards some of the stuff that you do for our podcast to kind of get it off the ground, and how we had to make some of the modifications to how we were doing the equipment.
Yeah. Well, the way I always like to do it is that I love to do like a one shot, almost like a radio show where, it was treated like it was live. If you made a mistake, you just kind of rolled with it. I didn't do any, really. I didn't do any. In rare occasions, I do some post-production where I'd go in and maybe like take out some dead air or whatever. But I just kind of figured that I liked the live feel of it. And again, going back to Drop Shock, my co-host, he thought it was good if not only did we go and do a one shot, but that we did it physically in person, because he thought that the body language and the dynamic would come across better in a recording. And I agree with him. I mean, I think that it works good when you're sitting with each other because you can read each other a little bit better. But I also think that you and I flow really well, where even though we can't see each other and make eye contact to let know, if you want to break in somewhere, I think that we still have a really good kind of natural flow there. But having said that, one of the things that we do for the show, which we didn't start out doing, was we'll use Audacity software to individually record. I record on my end, you record on your end, which does have, and this is the main advantage that we wanted to go for, is you get that clean, direct audio. So you don't have to worry about any static coming across, through the connection over Skype, because basically this is just you laying down your track directly on your hard drive, and then you just ship over your audio file to me, and I'll stitch it together in Adobe Audition. And although I had a lot of friends that did that, I felt like part of it's lazy. Like once the show was done, I had the audio file. All I had to do was run it through some filters that I'd already set up, like a template. So I didn't have to tweak it every show. Though I'd listen just, for obviously just make sure that fidelity was where I liked it. But the way we're doing it now, again, it's become a sort of a pattern that makes it easier, because again, I still have the same filters, and Audition makes it really easy to kind of set up your show, put your track in your slot, put my track in my slot. And actually, I think the quality is much better. And I'll probably, whenever I do a show, with you, or if it's somebody else, I'll probably always do it the way that we've come up with now, because I think it works way better just in terms of quality.
Yeah, and we had decided very early on. I mean, with the rare occasion of if we decided to do an interview with another person, I mean, you were pretty adamant about, if we did a show, it wasn't going to be an interview show. We didn't want to, have the two of us talking and inviting a new person each episode, because that seems to be a big thing with a lot of podcasts. Is it's the host interviewing somebody else. And you and I have more of a back and forth conversation format. So with us, I mean, we don't have to say, Skype anybody else in, and we don't have to say, hey, install Audacity on your machine. We don't have to deal with all that hassle. You and I both have the software installed. the MP3 Skype recorder and the other pieces of software that we attempted to kind of try out just was not working. There was too much lossiness, or whatever you want to call it, too much noise, too much reduction in the sound quality on my end, because we were recording on your end, that it was very hard to kind of even out the tracks over the audition. So working with Audacity kind of, worked perfectly in melding those pieces together, and it makes it sound like you and I are in the same room.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it has that feel, and I really do like the way that's kind of turned out for us.
Yeah, I like it too. And that's the other thing. I think that as we do this show together and we kind of get our rhythms, together working, I think the quality of the show will go up and up now that we've nailed sort of the software technology side of the recording. And, then we kind of work on our banter, which is already good. Like, I really think it's a really good relationship there. But, one of the interesting things is that I'll listen to, one of the shows I do listen to is Scott Hanselman's Hansel Minutes. And he has very interesting people on his show. But sometimes, even though I'm very interested in what they're saying, and he does it right too, like, it's a real short show, it's informationally dense, that's what I like. But some people, because maybe they're not used to podcasting, or just they don't click well with Scott, sometimes the shows are really hard to get through because the people are rambling. And I'm like, dude, I know, just get to the point. Just get to the point. And it's kind of frustrating. There are other shows, like other interview shows like that, especially with 3 people. We have like 2 permanent hosts and then a guest, and there's just not always. I mean, some people are really good at this, and so they know how to hit the beats. But other people, there's a lot of rambly, just kind of not making sense, or the host doesn't really kind of jive well. And so, yeah, that's sort of why I'm against that. And I like the idea of it's you and me just discussing our topics, because the show will only improve when you don't have that, like, the dynamic of a third unknown element.
Right. And we've also made, equipment, makes a bit of a difference too. I mean, we've both did a little bit of equipment upgrades. I mean, I'm running off of a Surface Pro 3. We're using Audacity as a software. So Surface Pro 3 i7 is my machine. I went out and bought a microphone, which is, I believe, the Lynx LLYX microphone, which it's a USB microphone. It works quite well. It's a bidirectional microphone. And then, like, an episode later, I just went out and got a pop filter to go along with it, because it sounded like there was, a little bit of popping going on. I wanted to try to even out the voice of that. And then, of course, I decided the episode after that, because my machine, if I didn't have headphones in, I think it was picking up some of your voice and kind of feeding it back in. So I decided to go ahead and plug my headset in. I got Skull Candy Hesh 2 headphones. I plug them directly in just so that they don't die, because they are the Bluetooth wireless. And I think that setup has worked quite well for me. I did end up buying a sound, kind of like a sound screen, but it's a sound screen on a stand. And it doesn't quite match up well with the height of the microphone. I need to get a slightly different microphone stand for it. I used it once, but I didn't see any difference between, the sound quality when I used it versus not. So I'm not actually using it right now. So that's kind of what I did on my end. Slowly, as a lot of the issues that we were running into were probably mostly from the Skype and mostly from the MP3 recorder. But I took it as an opportunity, before we switched to Audacity, to try to find actual improvements that I could make in equipment. Because having a microphone rather than using the onboard mic works, because sometimes a Surface Pro 3 fan spins up and you'll catch that. I mean, there have been times where I've accidentally not turned on the mic appropriately when you first call me on Skype. So instead of going through, the microphone, it's actually going through the mic on the machine, and you can hear the hiss from the fan. Yeah. And you'll point it out. You'll be like, hey, I'm hearing a hiss in the background. And then I'll check and I'll be like, the Skype's, saying that I'm on the built-in mic rather than in the USB mic. So those are kind of improvements that I made. I know you've had a lot of equipment already. I know you were searching for your old equipment and didn't find it, but you had like the mic stand already. I know you went out and bought the same microphone that I had. Was there anything else that you kind of did to kind of mix things up a little bit?
Not necessarily, no. Like I said, the software was the biggest change. Well, the software and the loss of my original gear, but doing the things through Audacity and kind of just kind of getting both the 2 tracks and then stitching them together on the end. With the hardware, yeah, I had a Behringer. It was like a Behringer podcast kit. You can still get it, but the one I got was better. Now I look at it, and you get a small little mixer. I had like a mixer and audio in device that was like, I don't know all the technical terms of what they really are because I'm not, an audiophile, but it came with a mic, a little mic stand, a lot like the microphone that I got based on your recommendation. It came with the mixer. It originally had a FireWire, but then I had to replace the audio sort of component because I switched laptops and I needed a USB component. So it was really nice. And then I could, plug other things into it, and I got extremely great audio quality. Oh, it came with nice headphones. So I got nice feet. I could hear myself much better, as I'm talking into the mic. I lost it. I don't know. We moved into a new house. And so it may be in the house somewhere. I can't imagine where else it would be. I remember bringing it into the house, but honestly, I'm kind of happy with the setup I have now. Much like yourself, I just have headphones. I don't even have Bluetooth. I just have normal wired headphones that I just plug right into my laptop, just basically to make sure that I can hear things much more clearly from your end. And yeah, just kind of plug in the USB microphone. It's good to go, and I have the little mic stand so I could swing it around and stuff like that. But I'm actually very happy with the setup.
Yeah, I'm hoping that eventually when we move, hopefully within a year or two, before the kids are 4, we want to move into somewhere with a much, much better school district than where I'm at right now. I need to get an office back because podcasting out of the kitchen, works for right now, but I kind of miss having the office that I did before we had twins. So, I mean, hopefully that pans out for me in the next 2 years and I can get, slightly different equipment. Cause I do like your swing arm, microphone stand that you have. It definitely coming over the top like that works a lot better. Cause I have my hands in front of me, but the mic is here also. So there's a restriction in mobility. So I think something like that really helps out. But we'll see how things go. I mean, here we are, this is the 11th episode. We've gone through 10. I think we've made remarkable improvements. And as long as nobody gets sick again for 3 straight weeks, we should have regular recordings kind of, out the door as we keep going.
I believe that to be true. And I think, listeners can expect that we might experiment more with just format changes. We never really know. I think we're still finding our groove and, can we do... I like the 30 to 40 minute sort of thing that we were discussing, 30, 45 minutes.
Right.
If we want to kind of figure out a way to maybe get 2 subjects in there that are related, I know that you had taken some measures to make sure that we're kind of balancing out the content. If we get too tech heavy, we go back into the cyberpunk pop culture stuff,
right?
And we'll try to balance it. So, I mean, there might be format changes, but I think this is an organic growth, obviously all geared towards improving the show.
Right. As we get more concise, I mean, the last 2 episodes, you might have noticed that there was probably 2 or 3 times in each episode where I've stopped myself short and Bill didn't pick up right away. And that's because I've actually been making a concerted effort not to ramble too much. But if you notice in this episode, I've tried to keep it much more concise. I'm not reiterating my points, and Bill and I are kind of flowing, together a lot better. So, if those improvements keep coming along, we could actually be able to reduce the length of the recording. I mean, this one will probably still be about 40, 45 minutes, but we'll be able to reduce a little bit of the recording time, and then hopefully start working in a format to where we can get one particularly tech heavy segment and then maybe turn that into a discussion about what it means for, cyberpunk and sci-fi and kind of some futurist, forward-looking things.
Definitely. Looking forward to that growth.
All right, man. Well, I'll catch you on the next recording then.
Take care, everybody.
All right. See you.
That's it for this episode of Codepunk. You can subscribe to this podcast on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, or listen to it on the web at codepunk.io. You can find Bill on Twitter at Norathustra and Michael on Twitter at Zool.